In this episode, we're summarizing the 4th episode from Season 4 of the Wire series titled Homerooms. The episode first aired on September 24th, 2006. In the beginning, Mayor Clarence Royce, concerned about his slipping poll numbers due to his opponent, Tommy Garcetti, capitalizing on a murder witness's death, strategizes with Police Commissioner Irvin Burrell, Chief of Staff Coleman Parker, State Delegate Odell Watkins, and State Attorney Stephen Demper. Royce decides to intensify his campaign, instructing Parker to discourage dual campaign supporters and use city resources to undermine Garcetti. He also pressures Burrell and Demper to downplay the murder in the press, despite criticism from Watkins, who had secured funds for a witness protection program that Royce neglected to implement. Royce remains adamant against it to prevent giving Garcetti a victory. For these people, their work has nothing to do with the citizens that they serve. We see how Mayor Royce is much more concerned about not ceding to Garcetti about the witness protection program and thus displeasing Watkins, who had set up the program to begin with. Instead, the politicians are concerned with poll numbers and who is supporting which candidate, not actually the people that they have to serve. Later on, Mayor Clarence Royce discusses career plans with Security Officer Herc. Royce, acknowledging Herc's loyalty, suggests he could achieve more than chauffeuring politicians. Royce calls Police Commissioner Burrell to help Herc secure a sergeant promotion, which happens, as expected, aligning with Stanislaus Valchek's prediction. Royce downplays his assistance when Herc expresses surprise and says, quote-unquote, "don't mention it." By this, Royce literally means, do not mention what you saw me doing with my secretary. As we catch up with Bunk on his quest to find Lex, a suspect in Fruit's murder, Bunk Moreland joins Jimmy McNulty and Beatty Russell for dinner at their home. Beatty's kids, Jack and Carrie, are present. Bunk invites McNulty for a drink afterward, expressing disappointment in McNulty because he no longer drinks alcohol. Using a lake trout metaphor, Bunk suggests McNulty may be pretending to be someone he is not, and McNulty agrees with Bunk. McNulty has grown a lot at this point in the series, and we see that his experience with Teresa D'Agostino truly made him see firsthand what he was doing to the women in his life, like Rhonda Perlman and his ex-wife Elena. Teresa used McNulty only to get information from him about his superiors in the police department, the same way McNulty and Bunk would lie to women in order to get what they wanted from them. In another scene, Marlo Stanfield visits Bodie on his corner, acknowledging Bodie's successful business and how much he has grown his business, but Marlo pretends not to know who Bodie is. Marlo proceeds to give Bodie an ultimatum. He can either sell Marlo's inferior product or vacate the area for Marlo's crew. Marlo spots Michael now working for Bodie. Bodie informs Slim Charles of Marlo's ultimatum. In the end, Bodie walks away from Slim to resist without backup, and he ignores Slim's advice altogether. Here we see how Bodie walks away from reason. Slim has far more experience in the streets than Bodie and has seen Marlo's crew in action firsthand. Slim does not want Bodie to stand up to Marlo because he knows he will surely lose. Bodie does not heed the warning and instead registers what Slim is suggesting to be a coward's move. Later on, Proposition Joe's co-op gathers in a hotel room to discuss their issues. Marlo's expanding influence and encroachment by New York drug dealers in eastern Baltimore. Fatface Rick emphasizes the greater threat from the New York dealers due to territorial expansion. The co-op decides to act against them and considers involving Marlo. They discuss Marlo's tactic of concealing bodies in vacant row houses. Slim Charles ends up warning Proposition Joe about the dangers of negotiating with Marlo, citing Stringer Bell's unsuccessful attempt at working with him. Prop Joe also does not truly listen to Slim. Proposition Joe is the type of person who believes that because he follows logic and is persuaded by reason, that Marlo and others would also do the same. This is a mistake that we all often make as well. Up next, we see Omar is waking up in a paranoid state, but realizes the noise coming from outside is simply a sanitation worker. Omar prepares to go out to buy more cereal and considers taking a weapon, but has no way of hiding it in his pajamas. As he makes his way to the convenience store, we hear lookouts shouting his name as he approaches, and all the dealers flee. Omar heads to the store, but they do not have his favorite brand of Honey Nut Cheerios. After Omar leaves the store and is on his way back home, he stops momentarily to spark up a cigarette, and a frightened drug dealer ends up dropping his stash from an unseen window above Omar. Omar reflects that he doesn't want those drugs specifically because there was no effort in taking them from the dealer. Omar decides to head back out for another hunt instead. While Omar is staking out a corner store, he sees Detective Kima is also observing the store. Kima grows impatient and ends up going into the store to look around. Moments after Kima leaves, the actual resupply arrives at the store when a man brings in the drugs with a small child. Immediately after the resupply is delivered, Omar is there to take it. In this scene, we see that Omar is driven by his code of ethics. He lives in a world where none of the other players seem to have a code. Marlo, for example, is entirely driven by power, whereas Omar is driven by that code. One of Omar's most memorable lines comes from this episode when he says it's not about what you are taking, it's about who you are taking it from. Omar is essentially a Western cowboy living in the late 19th century, a man living in a world and time that no longer exists. Remember, I am summarizing this entire series as well as other popular works of literature, movies, and TV shows. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next episode or series. If you would like to see the playlists of our summaries, click on the link in the description. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter for additional content. Click like on the video if you found it valuable, because that helps YouTube recommend it to viewers like you. Consider supporting us on Patreon or buying us a coffee if you can. Doing this will help my channel out tremendously. I really thank you for your support. Returning to the major crime unit, Greggs discusses the corner store stash house with Lester Freeman. Freeman, working on Old-Face Andre's cell phone records, hopes to tie him to Tote or Parlo. Lieutenant Asher questions the detectives about potential troubles, but they assure him everything is fine. Deputy Commissioner William Rawls briefs Lieutenant Charles Marimo on taking over the major case unit. Marimo plans to ignore political subpoenas until after the election. Asher is relieved of duty, and Marimo introduces himself, emphasizing cooperation and supervision. During an office meeting, Marimo orders a focus on murder cases and the shutdown of the Stanfield wiretap. Freeman challenges this, and Marimo suggests talking to Rawl. Disturbed by the unit's direction, Greggs considers transferring and meets with Major Cedric Daniels. Daniels encourages her to pursue investigative opportunities elsewhere, advising against returning to a district. Freeman meets Rawls, who respects his effort, offers a transfer back to homicide, and pressures Greggs and Sid North's careers. In another scene, we see the Deacon goes to visit Culvin at his home, discussing how dissatisfied he is with his current security manager job. Culvin rejects an opportunity from the University of Maryland to study repeat violent offenders. At work, Culvin intervenes in a hotel incident, but faces resistance due to the perpetrator being a valued customer. Quitting the job, he meets with the Deacon again and is introduced to Dr. David Parenti, overseeing the grant on studying repeat offenders. Parenti wants Culvin as a field researcher, focusing on 18 to 21-year-olds. Culvin realizes the target age is too high and suggests middle school children instead. Visiting a school with Parenti, they decide to focus on middle schoolers after witnessing disruptive behavior. Randy goes to visit Michael's house and they prepare Bug for school. Dookie joins them afterwards. They head to visit Namond, who shows them drawings made for his father in prison. Delonda refuses to let Dookie in the house though. At school, they discuss the new teachers. Randy is happy with his math teacher, Prez, while Namond dislikes Mrs. Scott. Michael is left behind taking care of Bug. Dookie finds a broken fan and ends up taking it. The assistant principal, Marsha Donnelly, greets all the students to instruct them toward their proper homeroom. Namond teases a security officer, drawing attention to himself. Prez struggles with classroom management, and Randy takes advantage to get hall passes to wander around and make sales. Prez faces disruptions in class constantly, including a fight and profane graffiti. Randy starts selling snacks during lunch, building his business little by little. Prez faces challenges teaching the disruptive students, and Letitia ends up attacking Shaquan with a box cutter. Mrs. Sampson intervenes, disarms Letitia, and calls for an ambulance. This scene depicts how everything that we have seen in the series thus far ultimately affects and destroys the lives of the children trapped in the inner cities. The war on drugs, the homicide rates, the overdoses, etc. They all directly feed into the public school system, and there is very little that the politicians at the top want or can do, as their concern is ultimately strictly on convincing people to re-elect them and not to actually improve the cities that they govern. That was episode number 40, titled Homerooms. To watch the next or previous episode summary, click on the link in the description or at the end of this video. In the description, you will also find additional links for supporting our channel. I will see you on the next episode. Goodbye.